In Venezuela, presidential candidate Nicolas Maduro was received by the people of the state of Zulia to accompany his candidacy for the election of July 28th. In Chile, supermarket employees continue on strike to demand higher wages and better working conditions. And in Palestine, Israeli occupation troops launched an airstrike on Al-Mawasi humanitarian area, leaving 71 people killed and 289 others wounded. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the Telesur studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, as part of his electoral campaign, presidential candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolas Maduro, was welcomed by the people of the state of Zulia to accompany his candidacy for the elections of July 28th. With a large gathering, the inhabitants of the city of Maracaibo expressed their support to the candidacy of the current Venezuelan president in the fight against the blockades imposed by the United States and its European allies. In this sense, the candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll thanked the people for their support to defeat the actions of the extreme right wing and promised to continue working for the well-being of the nation. Maduro also condemned the ambitions of the Venezuelan far right of wanting to reach power by any means of violence against the Venezuelan people.
¿Cuánto han sufrido ustedes?
How much have you suffered from the economic war? Do you remember the time of the resellers and the shortages? Did you suffer? Who asked for the economic sanctions against Venezuela?
Los apellidos, la oligarquía. ¿Cuánto ha sufrido el Zulia por la guerra eléctrica?
The last names, the oligarchy. How much has Zulia suffered because of the energy war? How much did you suffer because of the guarimbas? Do you remember the guarimbas?
¿Se acuerdan de las guarimbas? ¿Ustedes quieren que vuelva la guarimba y la
Do you want the guarimbas and the violence to return? They do.
Ellos sí.
They are looking for criminals and paramilitaries in Colombia to bring them and fill Zulia with violence again.
Y llenar de violencia otra vez.
The candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll expressed his rejection of the intentions of the extreme right to privatize education and give away the country's oil to its U.S. allies.
Ustedes quieren que venga un pataruco de presidente
Do you want
y privatice la
a
educación.
coward to come in as president
Ustedes
and
quieren que
privatize
venga un
education?
pataruco y
Do you want a
privatice
coward
el
to
derecho
come
a
and
la
privatize
salud.
the right to health?
Ustedes quieren que venga un pataruco
Do you want a coward to come and privatize and give away Venezuela's oil and gas? If the gringos want oil, it falls here. Cash. Cash.
gas, gas.
Of course we are going to produce more oil every time. Of course we are going to produce gas. And if the gringos want it, they will pay me in cash at the market price. It is over. Nobody's going to privatize the oil.
Nadie va a privatizar.
The Ministry of Defense of Venezuela met with electoral representatives of the United Nations in view of the upcoming presidential elections on July 28th. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez highlighted the importance of international relations during the presidential election process. In turn, the official pointed out that the armed forces will be accompanying the electoral process on July 28, 2024. He also indicated the Republic plan will guarantee the order, security of voters, the custody of the infrastructure of the National Electoral Council, and will take care of the electoral material. We continue on topic as we go into the relations between the United States and Venezuela and how they come into play during these elections. All the information with our special envoy in Caracas, Brian Meir.
For the past 25 years, the United States has waged a hybrid war against Venezuela, From failed coup attempts and financing violent far-right opposition groups, to crippling sanctions that killed tens of thousands of people by blocking life-saving drugs like insulin from entering the country, one constant between Democratic and Republican governments alike has been constant aggression against the socialist government of Venezuela.
Basically, there are two imperatives, two objectives that sometimes conflict with one another. The U.S. needs Venezuelan oil, particularly due to the conflicts currently raging in the Mideast and in Ukraine. But the other imperative is to bring about regime change in order to teach the region a lesson that progressive governments don't work.
When the Biden administration announced it was restarting dialogue with the Venezuelan government this month, some viewed it as a positive sign the U.S. government is going to respect the results of this month's presidential elections. But experts on the history of relations between the two governments have their doubts.
I think the idea of reopening dialogue is part of a greater process because the United States is characterized by a foreign policy of doublespeak. The United States often says something publicly while doing something different behind the scenes, and this is what is happening today.
Venezuela's presidential elections will be held on July 28th. Brian Muir, Telesur, Caracas.
Current candidate of the Venezuelan far right has blood on his hands, so say Salvadoran citizens who witnessed the dark role played by Edmundo Gonzalez when he served as the right-hand man of Leopoldo Castillo, who in the 1980s was the Venezuelan ambassador in San Salvador. Our correspondent Roberto Hugo Pereza obtained testimonies from people who witnessed this questionable chapter of the now presidential candidate of the opposition. Let's see.
At the end of the 70s and beginning of the 80s, in the middle of the Civil War, Leopoldo Castillo was appointed ambassador of Venezuela, a person who, from the diplomatic headquarters, would have financed death squads that assassinated thousands of Salvadorans, among them priests and four nuns of the Marignol order. Former guerrilla commander Nidia Diaz recalls that the conspiracy plan to torture, capture, disappear, and kill opponents was planned from the Venezuelan embassy and directed by Leopoldo Castillo.
He was later named Priest Killer. That is how he is known, for being an agent of death and persecuting Christians in the country. I do not doubt that he may have known or be linked in some way to the murder of San Romero, because later we learned that he was also involved in the murder of the Marignol nuns that happened in November 1982, and they also murdered many priests.
Nidia Diaz recalls that while she was a prisoner of war, two people from the Venezuelan embassy came to interrogate her. One of them was Castillo, whose closest collaborator was the now candidate of the Venezuelan ultra-right, Edmundo Gonzalez. Veteran diplomat Ruben Zamora says that, at the time, the United States carried out interference operations in Latin American countries and that the Venezuelans were accomplices in several crimes, which shows that Venezuela tolerated and sheltered self-confessed terrorists.
Just the fact that important people of the Venezuelan Christian democracy helped the armed forces of El Salvador, an armed force that was absolutely violating human rights, is already a crime.
Declassified CIA documents revealed that people from the Venezuelan embassy were mentioned as co-responsible for the intelligence services, authors of covert operations of the death squads, which carried out a series of massacres during Operation Centauro, financed by the United States. According to former Congressional President Sigfrido Reyes, Edmundo Gonzalez, the candidate of the Venezuelan ultra-right, was a witness and accomplice to these brutal acts.
Edmundo González ostenta ese tenebroso pasado.
Edmundo Gonzalez has this dark past and is directly responsible and co-author of war crimes and crimes against humanity committed against innocent and defenseless people who had stood up against a despotic regime. Edmundo Gonzalez has blood on his hands, and in El Salvador he is remembered as a deadly man.
Manchadas de sangre, y en El Salvador se le recuerda como un personaje funesto.
For this historian, the Venezuelan ultra-right wing was used by the United States for its political purposes, an interference that has been maintained for years.
The United States had its interests in preventing the advance of the revolutions in the Central American countries, and Carlos Andrés Pérez wanted international prestige. That is how hunger and need came together in the Salvadoran conflict, and that is how Venezuela entered. Since then, and even now in El Salvador, there is a group of Venezuelans working for the government of President Bukele, linked to the right wing against Chavism. So if you look at them, they are a kind of cabinet in El Salvador, people close to the Venezuelan right wing.
Despite the evidence and documents that have been declassified, both Castillo and González have denied such actions by an interfering government acting in complicity with U.S. destabilization plans.
Roberto Hugo Presa, Telesur, El Salvador.
Let's now take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at Telesur English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. In Chile, supermarket employees continue on strike to demand higher wages and better working conditions. The National Workers' Federation called the strike. The union groups some 14,000 members amidst the sector's largest. At least 80 supermarkets remain closed and 53 are partially open throughout the country. Workers demand a 20% increase in wages with regular cost of living adjustments, bonuses, better working conditions, restrooms in all stores, and more security. In Bolivia, President Luis Arce denounced that the right wing and fascism tried to cover up the attempted coup d'etat on June 26 with false speeches. The Bolivian president affirmed that only the right wing and fascism tried to cover up the attempted coup d'etat, calling it a self-coup and using disinformation and fake news in their favor. In this sense, President Arce affirmed that behind the attempted coup d'etat, there are economic interests that seek to take possession of the country's mineral resources, such as lithium. On the other hand, he thanked the support of the international community and affirmed that the people and the government will go out to defend the people's democracy whenever it's necessary.
We have all come here because we all have something, a common point, to defend democracy. We have fought for democracy. The Bolivian people have fought for democracy. Since I was very young, I have seen how the Bolivian people mobilized in 1979 with the Natush coup, in 1980 with the coup of Garcia Mesa, and just recently we have here the brothers who were victims of the massacre of Sancata, of the coup of 2019. The people go out to the streets to defend democracy. That is what the coup perpetrators have to hear from here, from Plaza Murillo, that the Bolivian people are not going to let the coup perpetrators get their way.
The Bolivian president also affirmed that thanks to the mobilization of the people in defense of democracy on June 26, the attempted coup d'etat in the country was not successful.
We, Bolivians, have shed blood to defend democracy, to have freedom, and today is not going to be the exception. The Bolivian people have demonstrated it. Like on June 26, when this square was already surrounded by the military. Evil military, the people mobilized, the people redeemed Murillo Square, and the people defeated the coup attempt.
Palestine-Israeli occupation troops committed a new massacre in Gaza, attacking a humanitarian area. Dozens of wounded were brought to Nasser Hospital after the regime launched an airstrike on Al-Mawasi humanitarian area, west of Han Yunis city. The Palestinian Health Ministry reported that 71 people were killed and 89 wounded in the attack. According to journalists on the ground, Israeli warplanes fired 5 missiles that struck near tents and a water distillation plant in Al-Mawasi. The targeted site had been designated by Israeli forces as a safe humanitarian zone. The northern population of the Gaza Strip is suffering a severe crisis due to the decrease in the flow of drinking water following the shutdown of desalination plants. The facilities stopped functioning due to the lack of fuel, which led to more suffering for citizens who have been under siege by the Israeli army for 9 months. The crisis worsened after the Israeli occupation deliberately destroyed the water wells in the north of the territory. Several authorities and international organizations have condemned the Zionist siege against the Strip, as it has been preventing and limiting humanitarian aid to millions of Palestinians. In this context, the World Health Organization demanded on Friday more medicines for the Gaza Strip after warning that only 5 truckloads of supplies have entered the territory. Director General of the organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said that 34 trucks are stranded in the Egyptian city of Al-Arish and another 40 are waiting in Ismailia to transfer their cargo to Palestinian territory. Therefore, he called for the immediate lifting of restrictions on the entry of supplies into Gaza, since the Israeli army is blocking the Rafah crossing, which connects the Palestinian territory with Egypt. And the Israeli occupation army withdrew from Zulia in Gaza, leaving a fully inhospitable area and more dead and injured amongst the devastated civilian population. This while keeping up a harsh offensive on the edges of the Strip that has forced residents to move towards the region's center.
When the Israeli army went in and out of Zulia and we returned to our homes, the destruction wasn't of this magnitude, but this time, when we returned, there was a full devastation. All houses were torn down. I don't want to go southward. I want to stay here, in my city, and I hope that as soon as possible the southern people return to the north and this war ends.
We now have a functional break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin American and Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Functional break, don't go away. Welcome back. Russia's Federal Security Service, FSB, assures that the West is seeking to replace Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky due to lack of responses and failures. The Russian magazine Razvedchik was authorized to reveal in a new issue such classified information until that moment. The FSB asserted that the U.S. State Department and European international organizations have several candidates, including former Ukrainian President Pyotr Poroshenko and the mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, among other politicians who may be able to respond to Western interests. In case of a drastic deterioration of the situation on the war front, the West plans to blame all failures on Zelensky. In addition, the briefing unfolded the main goal is to avoid a critical increase in Ukrainian disappointment with the failures of pro-Western policies. 21 people were killed and dozens injured in Nigeria after the collapse of the Saint Academy School in Jos North District of Plateau State. According to reports, most of them are students who were in their classrooms receiving lessons. Officials also informed that at least 16 students were rescued and taken to the nearest health center so that injured could receive the necessary attention. Likewise, authorities indicated that the cause of the collapse was due to the heavy rains in the region during the last few days. On Friday, Chinese authorities announced that 6 people were killed by heavy rains that lashed the southwestern part of the country. In this sense, according to local media, the county of Dianyang near the megacity of Chongqing has been facing a severe storm since Wednesday, with around 7,000 people affected by the rains and more than 100 ordered to evacuate. More than 250 millimeters of precipitation have been recorded, the highest daily maximum on record. China is suffering a summer of extreme weather conditions with torrential rains in the east and south, while much of the north has been hit by a heat wave. In the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, heavy rainfall, floods and lightning strikes have caused at least 38 deaths. The district of Pratapgarh registered the most fatalities with 11, as reports inform that most victims were working in farm fields or sheltering from the rains under trees during the thunderstorms, which have also left dozens of people with burn injuries. In addition, in the Kasaringa National Park in the state of Assam, to the northwest of the country, the flooding of rivers caused the death of at least 150 wild animals. In this context, the weather authorities estimate that Uttar Pradesh and neighboring states will continue to be lashed by widespread rains and lightning in the coming days. Let's go over to Germany, where the UEFA Euro Cup final will be played on Sunday, and where one of the best players of Spain, forward Dani Olmo, emphasized his commitment to bring the trophy home.
Yeah, well, England have shown
we have a unique opportunity in front of us, and we know it. We are one game away from glory, and we are highly motivated for it to come now.
England has one of the most talented young players in world football today, and there is no doubt that Jude Bellingham could carry his team on his shoulders into their first UEFA Euro Cup. Jude Bellingham plays as a midfielder for the England national team and is considered one of the best players in the world. He's known for his technical abilities, tackling, vision and finishing. In 2023, he won both major awards for male footballers aged under 21, the Golden Boy and the Copa Trophy, for the world's best over the previous season. Bellingham represented England at under 15, under 16, under 17 and under 21 levels. He made his first appearance for the senior team in November 2020 and represented the country at the UEFA Euro 2020 and 2024, as well as the 2022 FIFA World Cup. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.